Now we're going to talk about the HTML5 viewport. This is defined as the virtual browser window width. The actual width is usually larger than the width of a mobile device. So what it does is that it actually takes a normal web page and then shrinks it down or scales it down so that it fits within the mobile device's screen. So this allows the mobile browsers to actually fit the entire web page in the display. That's why everything looks so small when you look at it. It still works. You can pinch and zoom, to the important things, like if you need to log in or what have you. But it's crazy. This is not mobile development. That is like a traditional website being rendered on a mobile device. It's like going from a 30-inch monitor down to an old school 14-inch monitor, or even worse, down to a netbook that has an 8-inch screen, with a resolution of 1900. It's really not cool. So if the viewport was set to the width of the mobile device and not larger than the mobile device, then no pinch and zooming would be required, just because it fits. So this is the idea behind mobile development. So instead of saying your screen width is 1,000 pixels or 1,200 pixels wide, no, your screen for a browser, if you detect a browser, is going to be around 320 pixels, give or take, depending on the device. Some devices are different. So what we have is that we can get into changing the meta settings, which in terms of HTML5 viewport, this will be the first meta setting that you should ever set within your layout for your MVC application. This will be the one you use the most often, like all the time. There's not going to be like, well, I might use it once or twice. No, you're going to use it like all the time if you are serious about mobile development alongside your traditional web development. What's great about this is that it provides certain information to a browser. For instance, it tells the browser, hey, the content should fit on the device's screen. It also informs the browser that it's optimized for mobile. And what that means is that the pinch and zooming is going to be kind of non-existent if you do it right. We're saying this data, this content that we're sending to you is specifically made for a mobile device and not a desktop browser. So here's an example of the meta tag for the viewport and how it's rendered out. Obviously, we've all seen meta tags before. The name is viewport. The content is kind of like, I dare to call it like a style tag, like if you do inline styles, but that's what it kind of looks like. Essentially what you're doing is you're just passing a group of properties back for the meta tag of viewport. One thing to point out, among other things I guess, is width equals device-width. Now, this could take a pixel number there, so you could say width equals 320 for 320 pixels. That'd be great if the device, you knew the mobile device was always 320 pixels. However, devices are different. It could be 310, it could be 350, we don't know. So what this does is that this automatically will adjust it to whatever the device width is, and this should work most of the time with the mobile browser. The next couple properties, like the initial scale, is set to 1.0, and your minimum scale is half, and your maximum scale is 1. So if there is any pinch and zooming going on, it's going to be very minimal, but there may be something else desirable. Maybe you want the scale always to be at 1. It all depends on what kind of experience you're trying to give the end user and what you're actually showing on the screen. So this is just an example of using the HTML5 viewport meta tag. Back in our application that we started earlier, we're going to now add the mobile properties to our project. So we're going to do this by going to Tools, Library Package Manager, Manage NuGet Packages for Solution, and in our search for Search Online, we're going to look for jQuery.mobile.mvc, and there it is, and we'll go ahead and hit install and just let it go to our default web project. So this is installing all the dependencies that we need and files and whatnot in our project. and looks like it's completed, so we'll go ahead and hit close. Now what's really nice is about the latest and greatest version of that, it actually tells us to enable this we need to do this, and this, if you went through some of the other chapters, will recognize that that is a configuration file that is well known to those of us that do MVC all the time. So this needs to go into our global ASCX to basically tell our project how to deal with mobile configurations. So we'll just put that there. Go and hit save. And that's all we need for the global ASCX. And we can go ahead and close the README. We should now, underneath our views, we should have a layout mobile, which we do right there. We need to create an index mobile as well. So for right now, let's go ahead and look at our layout mobile. And in terms of the viewport, what we can see is that is defined right here. The only property that we're setting is the width, and we're just saying use whatever the device width is on the screen. And other things to note is that it is using our HTML5 properties to basically theme this as if it was a true mobile browser. So let's go ahead and see what this looks like, see if there's any change within our iPhone emulator. So it has slightly changed from our typical desktop view. Gone is the white. There's our title of home page. Here's our text. It really uses the H tags and the HTML5 markup like data role in the data theme. This is more readable than your typical desktop view on a phone. However, there is more room for cleanup to give a better experience, but this is definitely a lot closer than just viewing the desktop where we have to pinch and zoom around the screen to be able to read the page. So this is an example of setting up the mobile and using the HTML viewport. CSS media queries extend the use of media types. This allows better precision labeling of style sheets. This also enables the content to be customized for individual devices. Although, this does not force the changing of content. Here's an example. Here we are linking in a style sheet and using the media property of it, saying only screen is what we're worried about, and the max device width of 320 pixels to get this particular CSS class of phone CSS. What this means is that this says only screens that have a width of less than 320 pixels do we want to use the CSS class. Otherwise, it will ignore it and move on. The keyword only in this screen also means that non-CSS3 compliant browsers will simply ignore this call. Using CSS media queries to target the size of the screen is very common in developing for mobile and iPad tablet type devices. Here's a couple of examples that we'll go through. This follow example targets screens smaller than or equal to 320 pixels, just like the previous example from the previous slide. This next example targets between two sizes. Here we have saying only screen and the minimum width of 600 pixels and the maximum width of 800 pixels to use this tablet CSS. And lastly, just to reiterate, the only keyword forces non-CSS3 compliant browsers to ignore these rules. Next, we're going to look at targeting the screen orientation. This following code targets the portrait orientation. As you can see, it's pretty straightforward within the media property on how to target these things. What you would normally see is that maybe not calling an entire CSS class, but you can inject these media queries also in style blocks as well, where you could say for orientation portrait for a mobile device, make it taller. If it's landscape, which we have here, make it wider. So there are other properties besides just min width and max width and the device width and other properties as well that you can use within the media context. To get a better feel of how to use CSS media queries, let's look at an existing project that uses the foundation framework from the design company Observe and see how they use CSS media queries for the responsive framework. So I'm just going to go into their CSS file that they have. And I am just going to do a search for @media, which I've got right there. Okay. So the first one we run into, it looks like the default that they have. So if nothing else is defined, use this as the default. So let's find the next one. So here we have a media query that's being defined for screens that are at least 768 pixels wide. And that is defined right here by the minimum width at 48 imperial. You can put pixels there, but obviously imperial is the understood across all browsers. Here we have medium displays that are between 768 and 1279. And then here we have for larger displays that are 1280 to 1440 pixels wide. And these are extra large displays that you can see that are 1400 pixels and up. So you start to see a theme here in how you can define different properties for the same content and really transform the content based on the device that's actually looking at your content. It's similar to people that write articles and then want to reproduce the same article but not have it written in exactly the same way, so they spin it. In this case, we have the same content and we have different devices wanting to view it, but we want to make sure it looks the best across all devices that view it, so we literally spin the content differently based on whatever device is actually requesting it. So let's look here, see if there's anything more up. There's our orientation landscape being used. And there's our portrait. Here this is defining their blocks. Trying to see if there's anything else here. There's for print, which print's been used even back with CSS2. So that is a common from before. Here we see our WebKit being called along with the Mozilla browser engine. So you can definitely tell that a lot of work has gone into this foundation framework. But I'm sure you would see similar things with the LESS framework and others like that. But primarily we're just kind of hopping through, checking out the media queries for this. There's another print, seeing if they use anything kind of out of the ordinary. Most of the things that we've seen are minimum width and print. We saw our orientation. There's a max width. Okay, and now we're recycling over again. So you can see how some of the more developed frameworks out there use media queries. It looks like most of the time you're doing min and max width, you're setting orientation, and you're defining print. So don't feel that you have to get very complex in your media queries, but obviously you definitely want to look into using them in your next MVC web application.